I've never had a book do this to me before, like The Grace of Kings, where I was left so satisfied and the book was so good ending, good job, that I genuinely don't want to read on right now. I do not have the innate urge to read book 2. Imagine you read Fellowship, and at the end of Fellowship, they toss the ring into Mount Doom. And you're like, oh, that was a great story. It's over.
Story. We're done.
We're done here.
Welcome everyone to the Tutor Round podcast. My name is Richard.
My name is Austin.
And today we're talking about The Grace of Kings. This is a book review.
Oh, yeah. This is book 1 of the Dandelion Dynasty. Apparently there's 4 books. This was the first one. We're going to give spoiler free for the first 10 minutes or so, then get into spoilers. And do you want not spoilers on the book, but Rich, give us a little tinkle totter feely. What do you think about the book?
I quite enjoyed this book.
Me too,
So
sir. Me
I'm
too.
excited to talk about this one. It's going to be mostly a big discussion over the plot, because this is a dense book.
We do have a new little format we're going to try, and we'll explain that. But first, a quick shout out to the man Orkestad from our Patreon, who picked this book for our monthly Discord Patreon exclusive. In the comments in the description, you can see if you want to join us.
If you want to join us for a book club once a month, go ahead, click the link down below. That's where we do it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We actually talked about this book for the past month.
Oh, yeah. And to give quick spoiler free on The Grace of Kings, what does Richard think? What does Rich say to, hey, audience out there, when you come and you listen to our opinions? Unfortunately, Rich is also here. For the very few people out there who come and decide their next TBR of why should they pump this to the top if it's that good of a book? Is it bumped to the top of your to-read list worthy?
I think so. And specifically for the person who's been reading a lot of fantasy and has been getting this in their head of going, man, I've read this kind of story before. And just going through fantasy books and going, that's another one I've seen again. And it's more that westernized style of story. You want something new.
I just like how your pretentious voice just sounds like you.
Yeah. I am pretentious. That is me.
It's like, the typical person's like, I've had enough of this. Like, that's what you sound like.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Wonderful.
So that's the biggest takeaway I got from this, is a fresh take, a fresh angle on the fantasy genre, at least, of course, from a Westerner's perspective.
Yeah.
I imagine if you're someone from the Eastern culture, this is not as new to you, but it was new to me.
And that makes it great. I'd say to give 3 general thoughts of, is this book for you? Mm-hmm. And what is The Grace of Kings? What should you expect going in? Number 1, this book is extraordinarily dense. And I don't just mean long. There are longer books than Grace of Kings, but Ken Liu, the author, could have made what he did in this one book into a trilogy.
Very easily.
Am I wrong there?
Like, very easily could have been a trilogy.
A quintology, an encyclopedia knowledge full of what is contained in this book. Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad or negative thing. It's so dense where so much time goes by and there's a lot of moving parts in this.
Yeah, there's a lot of jumps in time where you would think, oh man, a whole book could be like this first part. But no, he skips, he cuts. It's so efficient for what he actually writes.
Yes.
There's no wasted moment in this book. He can't waste any moment.
The reading experience itself as well helps with the density of the book. I was about to say
density.
I don't know
the
pronounce
things.
I like midway, when you're midway through a word and you don't trust yourself to finish the word, you're looking for it. That's what I went through.
Sure.
Quick little blip. So the second portion about this book, the reading experience, the prose, is what I would say is biblical.
Not biblical as in like, this is as good as the Bible.
Or it doesn't use like thys and thous.
None of that. It's kind of top-down parable approach to storytelling.
Well, first of all, you said not as good as the Bible. We haven't rated the Bible yet. We haven't done a Tutor Ramble rating of all the religious texts.
Oh,
Bible,
Lord.
Torah. That's just imagine.
Ooh, yeah. Let's do a tier list of religious texts. That'll go well.
Like, they really didn't check off gun, Jesus walking on water.
Yeah.
So the reading experience is parable-esque, where it has this third-person omniscient point of view, where you are put in the scenes and you're kind of seeing the story from the perspective of the gods in this story, which is pretty neat. And because of that, there are points in this novel, I don't know if you felt the same, Rich. There's points in this novel that could have came off as a Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, where'd that come from in any other story? But because of the way this is written, because of the density of the book, it's totally fine. It's totally passable.
Oh, yeah. Several times in this book, I thought to myself, man, if this was in any other book or was written any different way, I would hate it. But for some reason, I really like it in this book.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was a fun experience for me.
And that goes to what you're saying to the person out there that's saying, hey, I've read this before. This is different in that way. It's got an interesting way of writing. Ken Liu has an interesting way of writing, has such density in this book. And my last point, and this is my most curious thing. I've never had a book do this to me before, like The Grace of Kings, where I was left so satisfied and the book was so good ending, good job, that I genuinely don't want to read on right now. I do not have the innate urge to read book 2, and that is not a diss on the book. It is more of a, he didn't end it in a bittersweet way. It just ended in a conclusive, okay, I just read the story.
Yeah.
Imagine you read Fellowship, and at the end of Fellowship, they toss the ring into Mount Doom. And you're like, oh, that was a great story. It's
Great
over.
story. We're done.
We're done here. Did you get the same feeling?
I did. I have no desire to read the next books in the series other than Ken Liu is such a good writer that I'm like, I gotta read more of their stuff.
And apparently, I just saw this on one of our Instagram comments from Shelf Centered, another fellow booktuber out there, said apparently people say book 2 is not just a better novel, but some people's favorite novel ever. It's one of those. So although we don't have that innate urge to read on right now, it's such a satisfying end.
We will continue on with it.
Yeah.
At some point, I know I'm going to be reading the other books. It's just, I kind of want a break. Was very happy with the conclusion that I just want to let it marinate there. And then I will continue on when I'm like, I want something fresh and new again.
Also, when we're older and wiser, because there's a lot of wisdom is passed down in this book. A lot of what?
There's some wisdom, but I will say, I got the impression on a couple instances. There's 2 particular messages that this book projects that I'm not sure if it's the character projecting this message or the author projecting the message.
Okay.
And if it is the author, I think it's wrong.
Okay.
If it's the character, I'll be like, okay, interesting. Let's see where that goes.
Well, we can talk about emotional impact, right?
Yeah.
Like the messages of the story. Because I don't want to get into spoilers yet. Because I want to give you a chance as well. Do you think I covered most of it? If going into this book, someone should expect those things, and what kind of reader would like this book? You're saying the person that has kind of read a lot of fantasy would enjoy this? I wouldn't say someone that's first timer, right?
No, I wouldn't say this is a intro to modern fantasy book. This isn't your Red Rising. Like Red Rising is a great intro to get into sci-fi. And that's not a knock on Red Rising. That's just that it's one POV. You can kind of follow, like there's not a lot of complex stuff. You can pick it up, put it down, and you understand where everything is.
I just know 50% of our audience cringes when they hear Red Rising. They're like,
oh, I know.
They're like, I clicked on a non-Red Rising video, and they're talking about it again.
Mistborn is a great intro to modern fantasy.
Yeah.
Because it's one POV, pretty simple to pick up and understand. This, not so much.
I found myself having to, I can't even imagine for you, character names.
Yeah, no, thank God. I was listening to the audiobook on this read through, and thank God, because it's just another person pronouncing the names for me, and I could audibly recognize them and go like, got it.
Nice.
If I had to read it and memorize the name myself, I would be lost. But for some reason, I can recognize it if it's an audio name. Like if someone tells me the name in the book, I'll remember the name.
Right.
Versus if I'm reading it, I'm just not going to remember it well.
So is it something that has to do with the visual versus audio, the sensory? So something with that is how your brain works?
I guess so. If I'm reading a name, I won't remember it very well. If I listen to the name, I'll remember it better.
Nate. You and I, as far as the Grace of Kings go, seem to be in the Grace of Kings. The public reception is a little strange because it has a 3.77 on Goodreads.
That's low.
So it's low for a Goodreads rating, but when you look at who's rated it, so people like Matt's Fantasy Reviews, another booktuber, I think Petrick read this. I don't want to quote him on that, but you look at booktubers. Booktubers love this book, but a lot of the general public, it's pretty divisive. Some people really don't like the style. But for our case, in our little echo chamber of our Patreon members, everybody loved it.
That's the first one in a while that everyone loved.
Everybody loved. And we had Teapot, for example, and our patron, she said that, and she's exactly right, this is not a character journey book. It's more of people living their life book, like following lives rather than going through a character. Like, there is a journey, but the way to describe it is more you're watching phases of a person's life.
Yeah.
And everybody had pretty good things to say. Orkestad, who this is one of his favorite series ever, I think his favorite series. Everybody had good things to say. What have you heard about this book before going in?
Honestly, I heard nothing.
Yeah, all right.
I think I've saw it a few times in BookTube of like, hey, this is a great book, but I had nothing going into the book.
Because it only came out, I think, in 2019. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right, but damn. That's it's really recent book, which is surprising.
It is. And so you want to officially get into what you scored, your official Rambler rating. For
the official Richard Rambler rating.
Yes.
The RRR.
The RRR.
I gave it an 7.80 out of 10.
Just when you thought Rich would have given something an 8. So 7.8 out of 10?
Yep.
Very nice. I gave this book a 7.25 out of 10. We're both right there. Good book, solid book. You're not going to see us. This isn't my usual reaction where I'm absurd and I'm falling in love with a book. It's not Richard's usual reaction of, I hate it. Just a solid time.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a solid time, you want to go read a book that has a very expansive world, and this is a book that someone like Rich, would love to talk about with somebody.
Oh, yeah. This is a talking book. This is, if you're looking for a book to go for your book club and you don't want just member-berry stuff like, oh, that was a cool scene. Like, I don't know about you, but when we read a book for a book club and it's mostly just like an action book, which is fun. An action book's fun to read by yourself. Trying to do an action book for a book club doesn't work very well. That's a short book club of, oh, that action scene was cool. Oh, that action scene was real cool. Like, there's not much to talk about.
Right.
This book, great book club discussion.
In your opinion, where is the best place to discuss a book besides, intimately with me on this pod studio?
Well,
second best place.
I would say our book club, but then that would be like the third self-promotion the past 5 minutes.
Just keep
going, hammer it
in the description below. So where would you say, besides those two places, where's the best place to just talk about a book? Not a bookstore, somewhere cool and unique.
Oh, well, normally I like to talk about books in the fast food line at the drive-through.
Oh yeah, with the car behind you.
Car behind me, or if there's a long line at the drive-through, you talk to the employee at the Chick-fil-A.
So when they ask for your order, you say, order. How can I think about order when there's just chaos in this world of the grace of? So you just transition.
I just gotta say, Chick-fil-A's customer service is so top notch that they will get somebody on there that has read the book that you've read just so you can have a chat with them.
I could see it.
It's excellent customer service.
That was such a curveball response, fast food line that I respected a lot greatly. Why'd you think of that? Did you eat there today or
no?
Just your brain's.
My brain always has Chick-fil-A somewhere in some corner of my mind.
Now, if we were to tier, I promise we'll get right back to the book after this.
Yeah.
I always have to ask the tier ranking of McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King. Where are you at?
McDonald's, Wendy's, and Burger King. I will say Burger King has just now jumped to the top of my list for one reason.
What do they sell now?
Nostalgia. They brought back the snack wrap. As a kid, that was my favorite thing in McDonald's is the snack wrap. And they got rid of it. And now Burger King brought it back.
They're back on top.
And it's the exact same as what my memory serves.
So it's good.
It's now back on top for nostalgia reasons. But that one, then Wendy's, then McDonald's.
I would agree with that order, except Burger King's is last. That's all. But what do I know? All right, you want to get into spoiler time, spoiler territory?
I think so.
Spoiler warning, click off if you have not read this book, or if you are going to continue on.
Rich and you don't care about spoilers.
Rich and I have a new little system here. Where do you want to explain that real briefly and how? So you can stick around. Spoilers, not yet. Wait another minute or two. And
we actually got a comment that both from the internet, from you guys, and then also someone from our Patreon, and also my own mother. And so put some thought behind it, is when we talk about this book in the spoiler section, we're talking about certain scenes or characters. We don't often give the context of it because we're generally assuming that people have read the book then and understand what we're talking about. But that's not the case for everyone. So after we talk about our emotional impact, how we felt about the book, we're going to go right into plot and really break down every segment of the plot and give our thoughts about it, giving you guys context of what we're talking about. So we'll generally summarize the plot before going into further details.
Right. We'll do characters after plot, which is the big change up, because we tend to ramble too much and stick too true to our name. Yeah. If we did it the other way. Let's see how this goes. Okay. So spoiler warning. We are now going to be talking Grace of Kings spoilers. Are you ready, Richard?
I am ready.
Emotional impact. What'd you give it out of 10?
I gave the emotional impact an 8 out of 10. What did you give it?
I gave it a 7.
7.
Very
okay.
Good,
solid score.
Good solid score.
What really pushed it up to that 7? What made it go from good to great?
Good to great. Yeah. I would say a couple big things. So the message of this book. Let's talk about some messages first, because besides just being satisfied by it, one message I got was take risks and gamble. From, Kunigaru, he's a gambler. And even the god at the end says he took the whole gamble in that scene at the end where the gods show up. And he says, I listened to Kunigaru, essentially. So taking risks and taking chances was very neat. But the biggest message I got from it was Kunigaru's leadership style. So message on leadership. And being a good leader truly means that you can't do every task perfectly. Like, leaders aren't, imagine a real world leader. You can't do the tax policy and foreign affairs and XYZ and science. And this, so you delegate to people who are smarter than you. And Kunigaru is a collector of people, and he chooses specifically, hey, you're the best at this, you're the best at this, you're the best at this. The only difference is that Kogo
is the biggest Deus Ex Machina in the whole book.
Is the best at everything.
He's the best person, period.
So it shows you the message I got from this book was, one, delegate as a leader. That's the best way to, and be charismatic. And you're supposed to be a people person. You're not supposed to know it all. But two, the consequences of that is, remember that one portion of the book where Kogo was gone for a week?
Yeah.
And then Kuni broke down. He's like, everyone I relied on, it's over. Help. Like, what would you do, for example, if one day I just disappeared? How would this work?
Well, first there would be the party.
You could, yeah.
I think it would be at least a 3-day rager. And then I'd actually have to go out and replace you. But
Well, I mean, we already know your dad would in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
Every comment that just kept going on that video, like, man, Richard's dad did a phenomenal job. I'm like, I know. Let's stop. He did a great job. So part of the message I got from the book was a cool little nugget on leadership and so forth. That's one thing. But for you, what message did you get? Why was it emotionally high or low for the Grace of Kings?
So for my emotion's sake, there were several plot moments that were just so satisfyingly rich and just made my head go spinning of the what ifs and how creative it was. So we'll get into in plot, but there were also moments where I was actually in my car just going no, Cootie, no, God damn it. I was rooting for, and I was really falling in love with the characters. So when the characters were making bad decisions or being swayed and tempted, I was invested in them.
Neat.
As for the message of the story, I think one of the biggest messages that the author is trying to show is basically progress over, let the past die, kill it if you must, a little Star Wars, but it's throwing away tradition, and that tradition holds you back. And traditional wisdom, convention, all that stuff is stupid. It got to a certain point that was almost a little heavy-handed.
Which point is that?
The end.
Oh. I think I see some cases where that's true, but I don't know if that's entirely the case. At least how I read into it, where I think another big message of the story is the passing of time and war and conquest. So what Emperor Mapiadere, am I saying that so wrong?
Mapitere.
Mapitere. That sounded nice. Yeah. That was
I listened to the audio book and haha.
I read it physically and went, completely butchered it. So the war and conquest and the means to the end, the things you have to do in order to take over nations like they did, the consequences of that is you create vendettas from all these people around in the Tiro states in this case. But any evil action you do to somebody will come back to kind of bite you. And the passing of time, whether it's with Pyrrha, the character Pyrrha, who we'll talk about in characters, whether it's Mata and how he was disaffected previously by the whole empire, but the stages of war and what happens in the past, some things even get completely forgotten about. Like Hugo and the people that started it, the Prophecy of the Fish, those two guys.
Oh, that was
Huno Krima, was it? And Shogun.
I have here, it was, oh God, do I not have, I wrote these down.
I think it's Huno Kriga. Huno
Krima.
Yeah.
Huno Krima and the other guy who's basically forgotten about, but Huno Krima becomes king a bit later.
Right. So I see what you're saying with some of the, we'll get more into plot details with more tradition versus progress, but it's a big scope on how war affects so many different layers of society and why death begets death in a certain way as well. Mm-hmm. But want to get into, so what do you mean by your tradition versus progress? You talking more about toward the end of the book where it's progressing with society, like more equality? So forth?
Not just that. It's when it comes down to it, by the end of the story, you kind of start seeing things click into place, that the heroes or the virtuous ones or the winners are the ones that reject tradition and conventional wisdom. And that basically anything traditional or known is wrong. So it gets almost into the ridiculous level by the end, so of course the reason why Mata fails is not only does he not listen to anyone, but he is stuck in the ways of the noble tradition that he has in his head. And he's so stuck in his ways that it is detrimental that he can't actually think his way out of a paper bag. That you have even further below the philosopher king guy who just literally follows the old philosopher text. So to a T that he's actually just stupid. And that Rin is able to beat him because, like, I literally have his playbook and this is stupid. He's making stupid moves. So all throughout it's all the people who listen to tradition lose. And all the people that are open-minded and are willing to throw away tradition in every sense and throughout society, those are the ones that win.
I see what you mean. I can see that message in there. Totally.
Yeah. And so where I'm hesitant on the message on whether or not that is this the characters, is this the author, because for this book particularly, for the most case, almost everything that they change about society is good. That's the message of the story. Like everything they decide to change about society works out perfectly in the end. Every new system they figure out is just infinitely better. Technologically, economy, everything. Where that becomes, where I start to get that is that's not how it works. Like change is inevitable and happens, but not every change is like positive direction. That's why conventional wisdom exists. And like, you need to be open-minded to change, but you don't change everything for the sake of changing.
Yeah.
Some stuff is tradition before a reason, and you need to understand why. And so that's where it's kind of strange. And I wonder if that's the message of the author or this book. And it could be very interesting in the next books where they've changed some stuff and will realize the folly of like, oh, there was a reason why this system exists in the first place. So that's what I'm curious about in the next book.
That's interesting, that message that you got out of it. I think our two messages kind of intertwine a little bit, where, you know, Cooney's leadership style. Yeah. The way I interpreted the book as well, and the thing that stuck out and blared out to me was that Cooney's open-mindedness, like you were saying, his open-mindedness and able to trust others and willing to, hey, half the population, females are just cast aside, so why not have inventors and so forth? So his ability to be a good leader and open-mindedness versus Mata's stubbornness and incorrigibility, that was a better leadership style, which led to
which is true.
Win strategy. So I totally see what you
totally see your point too.
That's look at us. Look at us seeing points.
Yeah, no,
I think that's how I looked at it. And then in retrospect now, I think you're also correct. So
here's the thing. It's not every single moment of the book.
Yeah.
The things where it took me out of the story just a smidge was mostly by the end, because all the changes going up to it are kind of obvious and like, hey, that was a great change. And it felt real in the story. But then when by the end there were some moments where they're making like technological leaps forward because of like, and I'm going like, okay, how much of this is like an asshole? I don't know. Like, oh look, we've opened up our site. We're so open-minded that we're creating all these amazing things. And I'm like, it just was real convenient that everything was going their way. And like there was no obstacles.
It goes back to the convenience of it, and those ex machinas, like the quickness of things, kind of just gets such a pass in my book because of how it was written and because of how dense the book is. The way he wrote it made it almost seem like it wasn't too forced because of the expectations that Ken Liu set at the beginning.
Yeah.
At the same time, sure, it did happen quick. Yeah.
No, because there are plenty of them that didn't feel that way, but then some of them felt differently. It just depended on the moment.
Right.
Like the moment I really enjoyed was Gia kind of pointing out the obvious of, hey, you are in a weak strategic position. Mata is discounting all people with like all women, all men who are not nobles or lower birth. Like he's discounting all these people. They are just as desperate as you. You're going to have an easier time pulling them to your side.
Yeah.
So be more accepting of who you let into the fold. And, women are half the population. There's bound to be talent in half the population. He's like, oh yeah, that's point. Smart.
And Mata could have never gotten that message because Mata would just close off any new idea that comes his way. Hence the progress part.
Exactly. And
I see what you mean.
Plenty of great moments with that and the characters that Cooney brings to his side. And like I really liked we'll get into characters in a second, but I really liked Gia the Marshal.
Okay.
Really liked her.
Jin Marshall?
Jin. Jin, not
because
Gia.
Gia is separate character. Yeah.
But I liked Jin quite a bit. But what came with that is a character that was like, oh yeah, I created a thing to basically melt rock. And so they basically created underwater
submarines, essentially. Yeah.
They made submarines. Yeah. They made these tunnels using water pressure. I was like, okay, that's a little quick. that's a little quick.
And you love your world building. You love your technical. Ooh, I'd like to see how this works. I love
the discussion, but it felt so fast, and I'm like, okay, this is a little ridiculous.
I'm not even kidding though. The way this was written, 1,000 years could have passed, and I would have been like, okay, acceptable.
Yeah, it was quick progress.
So you want to get specific? Let's talk plot.
Yeah,
plot time, and see how this new structure works. Where plot, would you give it out of 10?
Yeah, go back to my page.
I can start with I gave plot a 7 out of 10.
I gave it a 7.75 out of 10.
Nice.
A lot of this is going toward there's no fat on this book, and it's just impressive. So I really enjoyed the plot. I couldn't give it into that 8 because of my questions, I believe, where I was kind of taken out of the book during some sections, especially by the end. But other than that, I really, really enjoyed the plot.
Yeah, to your point with the again, how thick this book is and how much goes on in this, and the fact that he didn't make a trilogy out of it and just said, hey, we're cutting all the fat. Yeah. No, everything you read is just going to be part of the story here. Yeah. You can't name a chapter, most likely, where you could just cut it and the story would be the same.
Yeah, so let's get right into it, the plot.
Okay.
Talk about it. So part 1.
Yeah.
Part 1 starts off with Kunigaru as a young teenager watching the emperor come by, and the kite assassin, this assassin that's on just a lone kite, comes down and firebombs the emperor. The emperor survives, but it's that moment of Mata realizing the emperor is a man. He's mortal. He was scared. And that gives him an interesting moment to start his growth and to basically not put those nobles and those higher people on a pedestal. He no longer puts the emperor on that same pedestal and can see himself there one day.
And that with that assassination attempt, that was a good way to start the book, as opposed to think if you're writing this, you could have picked, okay, let's start with the rise of Emperor Mapiaderi. Let's start with the conquest. That could be a good.
They could have done just an info drop of the rise of Zana,
right?
Which they didn't do. Which thank God they didn't do.
Or start somewhere at a later point where Cooney and Mata are already older. But the assassination attempt immediately goes, okay, you're asking the question, why is someone trying to assassinate the emperor? So must be evil. Something's afoot here. Someone that's that passionate about killing the emperor on a kite, throwing a fireball like Dragon Ball, and then you're just going, why? Why is he doing that? So it was a good little hook to get you into a book which could have easily started off with, like you're saying, here's all the Tiro states, and that's not to say that chapter 1's not heavy with world building and a lot of info,
but it's built in.
It's built
into the plot rather than info dumped completely. But then we get to see Mata as well, and what an interesting start with Mata. So you kind of get his backstory on this noble lineage, and he and his uncle escape, and his uncle now has to raise him, but raises him the opposite way of he was raised. He knows that he was cowardly and wasn't raised in a noble way, and so he's like, I swear I will make Mata like the bravest, most noble warrior ever that I could never be, and raises him that way. And you get to see Mata see the emperor and this vow of revenge. And it's such a standard setup where I thought I knew exactly the story that it was going to go. I thought initially like Mata was going to be the main POV, and we're going to see him go on a revenge tour to take
almost
down
hero's journey.
Yeah, it started off of like, you think that's going to be the hero's journey storyline, and we don't get that particularly.
I was also locked in on, okay, of course Mata and Cooney are going to be best buds, which kind of went that way, but then kind of didn't afterward. Because the whole catalyst to this whole story, right after we get introduced to Cooney and Mata, the catalyst is a fish.
right off the get-go.
It's a fish, right?
It's a fish.
Where Huno, the names that we're awful at,
Huno Kuruma,
they essentially cut open a fish, stuff this little scroll in it, and have this whole little, and they say, hey, it's from the gods and so forth.
The gods say, I'm going to be king.
This little nugget starts this whole entire rebellion against the Zana Empire, right? Yeah. And I don't know if I'm skipping anything there, but essentially the rebellion is growing, and it starts from this spark of them lying and putting this scroll in a fish.
Well, to right before that, we're going into part 2 of the book. Yeah. It starts off with Cooney meeting Gia. And so you get that little love story, and I was down.
So down.
I was so happy and so intrigued with the promise that he makes her of, I promise to always make the most interesting decision in life. Like, you may not always be happy, but I'll definitely make the most interesting choice.
Right.
Loved that. Great introduction. That we get to see Emperor Mapitare meet the gods. And how did you feel? Like, what did you think when that scene happened? Because I was under the impression, like, I didn't know if the gods were, like, really real, or was this just an interpretation? Was this just a dream? What did you feel when you first
I immediately thought it was real.
Okay.
Because it's the way the book, I think it was the way the book was written again, and it's a very omniscient point of view. And as soon as I saw the gods there, it hooked me as where I would have been disappointed if it wasn't real, if there wasn't truth to it. Because then it would have just been like a useless kind of dream sequence that he's thinking in his head. I don't think that would have been a compelling narrative. So I wanted to believe it was real, and good thing it was in the world.
It was an interesting setup where I thought the gods were going to have a light hand in the world.
Like, let's just move.
No. They have a heavy hand.
They didn't just whisper like, hey, move your pawn, move your knight to F4. No, they moved the piece for you. Yeah. And we're going like checkmate. Especially later on when it gets to Tazo and his whirlpool. But with this section here, you have the introduction to, you have Gia and Cooney's love story. Very cute. And, Gia's denying everybody except for, she wants somebody interesting, somebody that's not your regular noble. And Cooney has this character shift right there in the plot where he's your noble bandit. You're kind of Robin Hood-esque. He's got a heart of gold, but hands of steel. And they go around, and this changes him. and changes his trajectory. And so as we get his development and the rebellion starts to grow is this the fish moment where we have the...
Yep. Then we have the fish moment. Yeah. And that was with Hunokrima starts the rebellion with a fish.
With a fish, yes.
With a fish.
And for those who haven't read, literally just these two guys cut open a fish, stuff a scroll in there.
And say, Hunokrima will be king.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then everyone sees like, oh my God, he will be king. It's the prophecy. It's basically someone opening a fortune cookie being like, okay, this is the law of the land.
To be fair, the setup is that Hunokrima and the other guy that he was
Shogun
were taking their prisoners or these conscripts to the emperor's mines, these tunnels. And basically they got caught in the bad weather, and they go, oh, we're not going to get there in time, and we're both going to die, and all of our families are dead.
Yeah.
Like, there's no hope. Why even bother trying to get there 5 days late? Mm-hmm. All our family's dead. And so it's like, well, if, my family's dead either way, might as well rebel. Like, let's roll the dice on this, which kind of shows another fault of Emperor Mapitare's, reign of, it's his fault that the rebellion can even have this start, because it's a ridiculous plan. But everyone is so desperate that they're willing to even try this stupid thing.
And speaking of ridiculous plans, is this where we start to get into Pyrrha? Pyrrha.
Oh,
yeah.
That's by the end.
That's the end of part 2.
That's the end of part 2. But
yeah,
before that, we get Mata and Finn taking back the Zindu castle, which...
Yep.
Epic battle scene. I was so hyped for it. I was like, okay, yeah, we're getting some Mata revenge story. And then we jump away from it. I'm like, okay. Then we get the story of Cooney. Cooney becoming a bandit and then going from bandit to duke. And so you get that, which is amazingly quick. How quick did that? I think that happened in a chapter.
But it was acceptable.
That's why I love how little fluff is on this. So much can happen in so little time.
Now, I will say the drawback of that is the reason I'm giving the 7s and 8s. It was hard to get uber invested in a character where you don't have that time to sit and soak with them, when it was more focused on the plot than the character. Yeah. So for the plot, it works well with the plot and getting you to go from scene to scene. And that's also why it comes off more, quote unquote, biblical, where you're reading it as if they're parables, after their stories. And there's nothing bad about that. It's a choice that the author makes. Well, and it works.
It's a plot-focused book.
Yeah.
But I still loved the characters. He did a great job getting me to care about them.
That's the amazing thing about it, is the characters are not bad in any sense of the word. So this happens. Rebellion's growing. They take over Zudi.
Yep. Takes over Zudi. And then we find out that with all this rebellion going on, Arashi, the Mapitare, is killed, assassinated in his sleep, basically, by his friend and advisor. And Arashi, his son, tiny, newborn son, is raised to be emperor.
Right. So this old emperor who did all the conquests, and by the way, we didn't mention, but this emperor was trying to live forever. And his whole goal was he was also having all these huge projects, which is what Hugo and what's his name? Huno, they were going to the mines and whatnot to, I think, assist with
the tunnels.
The tunnels.
He wanted to connect all the islands with underground tunnels.
Yeah, because this whole world itself is just there's islands here, and there's what, 6 or 7 Tiro states. I believe it's 6.
7, I thought.
7, and they take over the other 6, right? So the emperor's son is now in charge, but is he really in charge?
Yeah, so then we get the reveal that Pyrrha actually is the one that basically did all this. He kills the emperor, his friend, raises Arashi to the throne, and
Pyrrha is the emperor's assistant and advisor. And when the emperor dies, this is where he takes a little coup.
Yeah, right. And he chooses Lugo Krupo to help him with the coup. And we get the reason why is because Pyrrha, and I fell in love with the book at this moment. This was the moment I got sucked in, is we find out that Pyrrha not only wants to destroy the emperor, is not greedy for power, but when many years before, the emperor Pyrrha fell in love with one of the emperor's servants, and she became pregnant with his child. And on the day that Pyrrha is going to tell the emperor and ask him, hey, I've been your friend for all these years, please let me marry your servant girl. You haven't even noticed her. Never noticed this girl before. Like, please, just tiny favor of mine. This is not a big ask. On that same day, the emperor sees her, and it's like, bedchamber now. And now that the emperor slept with her, she is now his property. And so Pyrrha and her relationship is now illegal and punishable by death. The emperor finds out that she's pregnant and does the math and goes, you are not pregnant with my child. Basically, you have betrayed the emperor, has her and the baby executed. And Pyrrha says nothing because there's nothing he could do. And he vows revenge against the emperor. And not only the emperor, but the empire. He vows to take down the empire from the inside. So not only is he betraying the emperor, he's deliberately running things wrong and making poor decisions so that the empire falls.
The great plot element about that is it makes all of the incompetence justified. And there is a plot reason for the incompetence of the empire, which allows the rebellion to prosper.
Yeah, because in any other case, the rebellion would have a hard time if the Mapitare was actually in charge. No, it would be pretty easy to I know there's rebellion, actually send the troops there and actually,
and so
suppress
what
it.
Pyrrha does is he puts in charge, is it Kindo Marana?
No, he puts Lugo Krupo in charge.
Kindo?
That's the first. That's the first guy. Yeah, he's the the marshal or the what is his title? I can't remember his title. I think it's marshal there, but he's in charge of everything, and you think that he's super smart. You get more background on him he's just egotistical, just a terrible person, and not that bright. Like, he thinks he's so smart, and he's very close-minded. He thinks he knows everything, even though he knows about poetry. He's very knowledgeable about that, and philosophy. Neat.
But you're saying this message of closed-mindedness continues. Like, closed-minded people fail in this world.
Yeah, exactly. He knows nothing of war. He knows nothing of leadership, knows nothing about running any kind of empire.
So he's perfect for Pyrrha.
Perfect for Pyrrha to run it to the ground.
Run this empire down.
To the ground.
Yeah.
So that is part 2.
Okay.
We go into part 3, and we start off with King Thufi, which is the shepherd, who is basically swept along. Somebody somewhere goes, oh, actually, this shepherd boy was supposed to be the real true king. So they pull him along. It's like, all right,
again,
fine.
all of this is like, you'd say this in any other normal book.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, wait, what? Where'd that come from? But no, it works. Just trust us. It works.
Trust the process. So then you have that King Thufi starts leading the rebellion in seriousness. Then Kindo Marana is the tax collector of Zudi. And we have Lugo Krupo is just annoyed with all this talk of rebellion, and he picks out the most annoying guy. And he's like, ugh, this is so stupid. I just want to put someone else in charge of this. And doesn't care because he thinks the rebellion is nothing. So he's like, oh, I'm going to take the tax collector and make him the leader of the army.
So to follow, Pyrrha, who wants to topple the empire from the inside off of a vendetta, a justified vendetta, appoints this Lupo guy.
Lugo Krupo.
Lugo, who is too lazy. So Lugo then says...
And stupid.
I'm appointing Kindo Marana. So we're now 3 layers deep.
Yeah, but the twist of fate and the gods kind of play this hand is the gods know that Kindo Marana actually has some talent. Like, he's actually a smart individual. Yeah, he's gone his whole life doing taxes. That's his whole thing. But in many ways, it makes him actually a competent leader when it comes to the army because he actually takes stock of things. He's logical and knows how to work things out. And also fairly open-minded. He learns things.
Right.
So that's the gods have their little light hand in making that decision. it's the one good decision that Lupo made on accident.
On accident, yeah.
For the wrong reasons. But then we have Krima, which was the
Huno Krima.
Huno Krima. He
The fish guy. The
fish
prophecy
guy.
Yep.
Fish guy prophecy. He becomes new king of a new tier state.
course.
Just kind of chaos and like,
Of course.
all right, I guess
Of West Kokru, right? Doesn't
Yeah.
he create his own? Because Kokru is the Tiro state.
Yeah.
Or am I wrong in that? Ooh.
Yeah.
Kokru. He creates West Kokru.
Yep.
Okay.
And he's kind of just going crazy on power. He's
in Dimu right now, the city of Dimu,
Mm-hmm.
I believe.
He has no leadership skills when it comes to army. His army is just a gigantic mob. And when he does things, it's just, he thinks that the whole thing about being a king is you order things to get done in unreasonable time, and they will get done because you're king. Mm-hmm. And he's just dumb. Mm-hmm. So we have him, and we get the moment where Mata is kind of reintroduced again. Mata sees this new king and disapproves. And it's like, this is...
Shows up. He wants to see, like, who is this new king?
Yeah, who is this guy that we're supposed to, like...
Yeah, and
this
the
is
rebellion.
weird.
Like, is this the man I'm supposed to follow, right?
And finds, no, this is stupid and ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you aren't a noble. Clearly, noble blood is needed, and you are not it.
Right.
And you confirm my suspicions.
Viewers, imagine showing up to a random Q&A and being like, ooh, who are we listening to today? And it's Rich. That's basically how he felt walking. It's like, this is what I'm getting.
This guy is what we get. But we have that. Then we have Kindo Morana actually convinces an old general to come back into the fold.
General Namen.
General Namen,
And
which is a good decision.
This is the first sign as well that Kindo, is Pura is trying to make this all incompetent and destroy the empire. But accidentally, Kindo Morana is actually kind of decent at his job.
He's kind of like holding this thing together.
This tax collector's like, all right, we're actually going to create the bastion of this empire. And he's doing his best.
He's doing the best he can. He's against literally his own emperor and also the gods. All of them are against him, and he's somehow holding things together.
Honestly, underrated, underappreciated character.
Oh, yeah. So he actually gets convinces the old general to join Zana again, but then now Zana's kind of on the winning path. They're picking up speed because then...
Right, because the rebellion has taken over Kokru, that's King Thufi's. The rebellion's starting to grow a bit. And they're getting so big that Kino Morana gets an old general that worked with Emperor Mapiaderi, right?
Mapitare.
Damn it, you just say it. I don't want to say it, but you do say it really well. I hate to say that to you. It's great. So
But-
he worked with Mapiture, this
Yeah.
old general, and so he has the most experience.
Yeah, an actually good general.
And he says, hey, come out of retirement, help us. This rebellion is going to topple the emperor that you just helped your whole life.
Which, by the way, a great moment for that, which I really, really liked his character, is he was talking about his experience as a tax collector. And he's like, the key to being a tax collector is knowing what pressure points to hit on. That nobody wants to give you money. However, you can't outright force them or else they'll hide it. You have to push the right buttons to get them to do what you want.
Right.
You have to find out what they care about more than money and push that. And then they will freely give you the money. You don't even need to check.
yeah.
So I love that moment where he's analyzing it that way. So then when he looks at the general, he's like, I know which buttons to push to get you to do what I want. In the same way, what do you care about more than your retirement and you care about more about your country and your legacy? And that's the button he pushes to get him to do what he wants.
Very smart. Very smart.
Then we have King Krima dies, the crazy fish guy.
Yeah.
Fish King. The crazy Fish King.
That's his nickname now.
Yep.
Fish King's gone.
Yep. And then we had King Thufi, the shepherd boy, names himself Precept, and it's like, hey guys, all you Tiro states, you guys are squabbling over land we haven't won yet. Let's win the rebellion first.
Yeah. Step one.
And then we can quibble about all these little things.
Right.
And then he doesn't make Mata the marshal, and that pisses off Mata a little bit. Then we get all the way back to Kuni. Go back to Kuni in Zudi. Zudi rebels against Kuni because they think, the Empire's going to win again, so they kind of kick him out. And that is when Kuni and Mata now join forces to take back Zudi, and where they become friends. And
Yes.
what a good bro moment.
Right.
How are you feeling on the Mata and Kuni bromance going on?
So it sparks because they have these two opposite personalities where we've seen Mata, and as this rebellion's growing, we're seeing that he is the more laser-focused, honor, kill for honor, and this kind of chivalry, which isn't really. He's got that physical power over intellect, while Kuni is more merciful. Kuni's more open-minded. So while Mata is just for vengeance and blood,
Well, his whole thing is might is right.
yeah. Well,
If you're whoever is stronger is morally right.
and where Kuni is more on mercy. So as we see their friendship go together, and Kuni pulls back and gets this, he gets Mata to be a good soldier, but not a bad person when he's around. Because he tempers him, and
Yeah, he makes Mata a better leader,
exactly.
and Mata makes Kuni a braver individual, and really brings out that courage in Kuni, which is what he needed. And so I really loved their relationship in the beginning.
When this point hit the book, I'm like, okay, so now I see where it's going. It's going to be they're going to take over the empire together.
Kuno and Mata, they're going to take over the world.
One of them might die, and it affects the other one, and that's what I was thinking. I'd be thinking wrong.
So then from there, we find out that they're trying to defend Zudi, and they're actually able to hold it. They're winning against the Empire, and then they go to take the next town. And I believe that was Dimu. So Mata and Kuni now go to take Dimu. And this is one of those moments that you kind of see another layer of Mata's character, or at least more of an example of his cruelty, where he makes a threat to the town of Dimu, the city of Dimu, and says, "For every day you don't surrender, I will kill 100 prominent members of your town." And Kuni's like, "What the? Whoa, man!" And it takes about 10 days for them to bring down the walls and take Dimu. And Mata follows through on that threat,
Right.
despite Kuni pleading with him. And Mata doesn't just kill 1,000 people; he buries them alive, and they're screaming under the mound of dirt and oof. You suddenly have okay, Mata's not the good guy here. He's no longer he's losing a bit of his shine. So I think that was a interesting moment that we had here in the book.
Yeah, and the way that was described, not in the book, but you just saying that to me, I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That was you really were super specific when you said buried alive. Like
The
David
screams
Attenborough
could be heard for hours.
So we see Mata and Kuni still friends, still bros.
Still bros.
But now where's this going? What point of the plot are we at now?
And then we're ended off with Princess Kikumi.
Yes.
And what a great character. I really loved her character. We only got maybe 2-3 chapters with her, but we first see her as this beauty, that she's gorgeous. Everyone thinks of her the most beautiful woman alive. And she is shackled by that beauty, that no one takes her opinion seriously. They only see her as a beauty object. That's it.
We are like Princess Kikimi. No one takes us seriously either, but not for our beauty.
For different reasons. For different reasons.
Very different reasons.
But she's quite intelligent. She's has the capacity for great manipulation and mind games, which she shows off. And then she is threatened and says, "Hey, look, I'm Or then you have Kindo Marana basically threatens her, says, "Hey, look, if you don't assassinate one of the Zindus, I will torch."
Zindus, that's either Mata or his Uncle Finn.
Yeah.
Right.
So gives her the choice,
Yeah.
which dumb on his part. Real dumb on his part. But whatever. Should have went for both or something.
Right.
But if you don't do that, then I will destroy your city and make it known that you were the reason. Like, you were given a choice. The Zindus or your home, and you chose
All right. And she does play into it. She goes to Zindu and she falls in love with, not falls in love, pretends.
She finesses.
She finesses with Mata and with Finn, so with the uncle and nephew. And the ultimate decision, she goes with Finn because she didn't want to kill Mata. I think she chose Finn because he would have been an easier person to kill for her.
Yeah.
And she does kill him.
Well, not just easier. It's interesting how she makes the choice of between Finn and Mata. And she goes, right now, Finn is the marshal.
Yeah.
However, Mata's much younger, stronger, and given the choice, she thinks that the rebellion has a better chance with Mata at the helm than Finn.
Right.
So she chooses to take the weaker one out. In many ways, she's showing her favorability to Mata in this case. And she's ultimately correct. Like, Mata was the better choice to actually take down the Empire. So, but in that moment, she realizes, oh, this was the plan all along, that if I do this and it's revealed that I assassinated the Zindus over for my city, then the rebellion will torch them as well. And so she sacrifices her own pride, her own legacy to save her home, which one of the more noble acts that this entire book, and definitely shows a lot of these characters have a ton of pride and kind of gets in their way, especially Mata, and she's able to throw it away for her home.
Again, yeah, so not being prideful has benefits characters in here. Maybe not just benefits because she didn't do this selfishly, of course. The only people that know what Kikomi did were the readers.
Yeah.
So the characters...
Well, also we had Kindo Marana. Also
yeah, of course, because he's the one that set this up.
And even he goes at the very end, he was like, man, I'm impressed with her. Like, she foiled me. Even
gotta
my
respect it.
You gotta respect that.
Come on.
Man, she sacrificed her own legacy to ruin my plan.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I loved her character. That was a great moment for me. Then we go into part 4.
Yes.
And this is basically
Is this the banquet scene?
Oh, shoot. I completely forgot.
Which portion? So there's a lot what we have to do with...
We completely missed out some stuff.
So Cooney, on that side of thing, gets approached by the assassin.
Yeah.
Right? So what's going on in this area as the rebellion's growing? I
skipped a bunch of stuff.
It's okay.
All the important things. We have, of course, Luanzia, which is that assassin you're talking about. He and Cooney meet up, and there's a plan.
Right. We hadn't seen the assassin since, remember, chapter 1, where he was on this kite trying to attack the emperor, the old emperor who's now dead. Come on.
Mapitore.
Oh, I love it. So he comes back. Luan, he escaped at that initial one, and now this is like chapter 18 now or something like that.
Yeah, they met him before. Cooney met him before he met Mata. But then he's now an advisor to Cooney. And so now after...
Met him before... Was it before Mata?
Yeah. So when they're kicked out of Zudi and they're going to go get the rebellion's help to take Zudi back, they meet Luanzia.
Okay.
And Luanzia comes up a little later. But after Kikumi's betrayal, they're now... you have the new push towards Zana. And Luanzia comes up with a plan.
Yeah, I thought that he met Luanzia pretty randomly after he met Mata. I thought it was after that case, right? He met Mata first. I'm almost... No?
Nope.
You sure?
Before.
So immediately before.
Because
I thought when the assassin met Cooney, like the very next chapter, they went to Tanadu.
No, so basically Cooney is kicked out of Zudi. And they're like, I'm coming back. And while they're in the woods going to get to the rebellion...
But he hadn't met Mata at that point?
Nope, they're going to meet Mata. They're going to the city to go get the rebellion's help, to go take back Zudi. They meet Luanzia. We get his backstory. And then they part ways. Then Cooney meets Mata, and then they go to Zudi to take it back.
That's his first meeting with Mata is right after Luanzia.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed that part. There's a lot of stuff in this book. I'm very sorry that it gets
a lot
confusing.
of details. We could keep going.
Yeah. Then you have...
and also let us know if you like this new format where we're going through the plot and then so there's context and then
so people
go
actually
from there.
understand the story. I think for this book it was necessary, or else
There's a lot.
people get confused. I'm even getting confused. But after Kikumi's betrayal, we go back to Zana, and we see Pyrrha and Krupo kind of a little bit at odds. Pyrrha now is thinking, Krupo's getting a little too big.
Right, he's
for
trying
his
to topple the
britches.
empire, and it's not toppling the way he wanted it to topple.
Not just that, but he's also going, he wants to get me. He's going to try and betray me first. So before he backstabs me, I'm going to backstab him.
Yes.
And fabricates evidence that gets Krupo thrown in jail and executed. So bye-bye Krupo, dum-dum.
Yep.
Dum-dum philosopher who almost single-handedly toppled the empire. Then we have Luan Zia's plan to take down the emperor, Emperor Arashi. And so Kuni leaves in the middle of the night, tells no one his plan. He's off.
And it turns out that his plan was this is where he'd been the previous years, on this island off the coast of the main Tiro states. It's called Tanadu, correct?
Yeah.
And on Tanadu, there's these locals there that are a completely different culture. And as soon as people show up to the island, we get the backstory with Luan of he showed up there and they welcomed him and they were like best of friends. So he showed up back to the island that he'd been at this whole time that he's been missing from the book with Kuni, right?
Yeah.
And shows up with them, and the people on this island, there's this cool scene of where they wrestle with each other. They tell stories. It's your classic, bonding and being friends. And then from this is where we find out how they're going to attack the Empire.
And they're going to use this sea creature called a Kruben, which is like a whale with a horn.
Yeah.
A narwhal, basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm... Like a large narwhal.
Very. And
that's kind of my...
They're going
image
to
in my
ride
head.
them into battle.
Yeah. And so they have... Kuni and his strike force on these Krubens sail to Zana, and they basically capture the capital. And, well, they go to an island to get an airship to get land in the capital.
There's details. There's
details. Whatever.
Is that the coolest thing to ride into battle on?
A whale? Yeah, I think a horned whale.
Can
would be
anything
pretty cool.
top that? A dragon? Does dragon top horned whale?
Dragon, you see it a lot. Horned whale thing is unique, and I have a image of like Captain Jack Sparrow just holding onto the horn of a whale, just sailing into battle.
You start crossing books, it's the Horn of Valier from Wheel of Time. It's like, wait, wrong book. Toss it away.
But so Kuni actually takes down the emperor and wins. He wins the rebellion. At the
Yay.
exact same time, Mata is
at Wolf's Paw, right?
he's at Wolf's Paw. He's dejected because of Kikumi's betrayal, and he's just kind of sulking.
Well, the way it goes too is like Kuni's whole thing was they use the whale and so forth, and they kind of do more of a more special ops mission where they drop in from the air and they go to the capital city of Pan and they get to the emperor, and so they have him now. They don't have a lot of people. They have like 500 men, but they have the emperor at gun. Okay, knife point. They don't have guns in here, but they're like, okay, we have the emperor. We did this. And Kuni's whole thing is he's going, okay, I did this. I can't wait to tell Mata.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna send a letter to Mata. We're gonna rule together.
This is gonna be great. Well, Mata is at this other area called Wolf's Paw,
Yep.
where pardon my French, but shiitake goes down. It goes down in Wolf's Paw, right?
And Mata single-handedly does a 10-to-1 charge against the enemy.
The way he does it too, and in this battle sequence, he's at Wolf's Paw, he's attacking the General Namen and so forth. I think that's General Namen, best army, this old general who was with Mapiradari.
Mapitare.
Shit. Okay, with Mapitare. So he comes down
French.
here.
That's what.
Just think
say
French.
Think French, and you'll say it right.
Mapitare.
There you go.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll stop. I'll stop while I'm ahead. So what he does is Mata brings all of his ships here, and he does an art of the war trick from Sun Tzu. So art of the war, one of the tricks is don't close your enemies off. Always give your enemy an escape, right? As you read Art of War. Give your enemy an escape, because if they don't have an escape, if your enemy is trapped, there's only one direction to go, and that's forward, through you. They will fight with all their heart, and you are the target. So what Mata does is he uses the battle strategy. He burns all the ships that he brought his army on. Says, hey, army, here's all the ships. They're burnt. We either attack or you die. As a leader, probably not the most moral of things, but it made his army fight with vigor, just going straight and attacking, and led them to win a battle they were outnumbered on.
Yeah.
But I like that the battle strategy is based on something that's actually true it
is a true battle strategy, historically speaking.
Right. So Mata does this and wins.
Yeah. But slaughter. Yeah, a lot of dead. But
then
even
makes a
beyond
deal with a god.
Yeah. Then he makes a deal with, after he survives, he wins the battle, and he captures about 20,000 Zana soldiers. He makes a deal with the gods, specifically, what was that god's name? Tazu. And sends 20,000 soldiers out into the ocean to drown.
Which the gods have this pact where they're not supposed to be involved. Which,
yeah.
And so one of the other gods is
they're not supposed to directly be involved.
Which I guess technically, I don't even know how it technically works or not.
Yeah.
You killed 20,000 ships. That's pretty involved.
Okay, the more details of it would be Tazu comes to Mata, says, I need if you sacrifice a bunch of lives to me, I will destroy the enemy's fleet of ships. Like, I'll destroy them all. Mata's like, no, that's wrong. I won't do that. And goes, okay. Then Tazu's like, okay, well, you said no to me, so I'm going to put a tsunami on your coast and destroys all of Mata's ships, kills, hundreds, possibly thousands of his own people on Wolf's Paw, and then comes back. And Mata's like, well, it's either I do the thing the god asks, or the gods keep attacking me. Okay. And so he sacrifices 20,000 Zana soldiers to Tazu. And Tazu's is like, yum, 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 yum. And then destroys the entire Zana armada. And that's a little direct. It's a little direct on the hand, but everyone's realized, like, oh, wow, Mata slaughtered 20,000 unarmed, surrendered soldiers. I'm a little scared. I'm a little terrified of him.
This isn't good.
And that word kind of gets back to Kuni and his advisors, and Rin decides,
because Kuni has the capital right now of the empire,
and Kuni tells Rin, like, hey, go deliver this message to Mata, invite him in, don't let anyone else know, because I want Mata to be the first one here, so that way we can rule together. And Rin says, you know what's better than Kuni and Mata ruling? Just Kuni.
More specifically, just Kogo. Which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to. But that was a mistake, because Mata then marches on, realizes, and thinks, Kuni betrayed me. He took the capital without me. And I thought we were supposed to lead together. And Kuni's like, oh, well, I gotta leave, because Mata's angry, and Mata slaughters a lot of people. So he leaves, and Mata does. Causes ransack. He burns a lot of the pond to the ground and all this stuff, and then takes over. And
right, because Mata got this wrong message.
Yeah.
So he thinks Kuni betrayed him. Kuni's like, how do I now get this? This is one of my negatives of the plot. I think this could have been a more interesting portion if we're talking about how the conflict arose. The miscommunication trope isn't my favorite.
Yeah, mine either.
And
it takes away some culpability from Kuni.
Yeah, it takes away. So if Kuni could have made a more active character decision there, where maybe he decided Mata went too far.
Yeah.
Instead of it not being his fault and Rin sending the wrong message, exactly, it takes the consequences off the character themselves. But it does lead to more interesting things later on. Whereas, Kuni leaves the capital city, and Mata takes over. It's now basically he controls it. And we get to the point now where they're reunited at a banquet that Mata holds for all the new. This is now, he declares the Principate. This is the new, not empire, but the Principate of the Tiro states.
And this is the start of part 4. So
yes.
End of part 3 is the end of the Zana Empire.
Yes, end of it.
Toppled.
Now Mata's got it. This Principate happens, and he has a banquet with all the leaders.
And Kuni has a moment of realization that he's lost his brother. He
Yeah.
can't, if he tells him the truth, it won't be perceived that way. It'll be perceived as a lie. And he realizes that he has to lie to Mata, and he can now no longer tell Mata the truth and actually rule with him.
Right.
And so he lies, and he's able to skate his way out from being assassinated. And after that, Mata now draws new maps. And this is the start, I think. This is the large start of Mata being a real big dum-dum.
Yeah.
Like, real dumb. So he's just creating this new map in a stupid way. He's drawing new Tiro states and making new people leaders, and just off of his feelings of like, hey, that guy was kind of nice to me that one time. Duke. King. Hey, that guy disagreed with me. Nope. He's now exiled.
Right.
And basically, he causes chaos, and he sends Kuni to tiny little island of Dasu, which is the furthest thing away. It has no land. It's incredibly poor. It's like, that is now going to be your island to be shielded off.
Basically, nobody's there.
Nobody's there. And he also keeps Gia and his children as kind of hostages.
So he sends Kuni to rule this little nothing land.
Yeah.
And Kuni's now put in this position of how does he deal with this? What does he do? And it's the first step he takes is he's on this little island, but he fakes being sick on the island and sneaks over to see his wife all the way back on the main islands and in Zudi. So he sneaks back and sees his wife. And we actually didn't mention a point in the plot where before this, Kuni cheated.
Yeah, so when Kuni entered the capital city of Zana, Pan.
Right, before Mata took over the empire, this is before the Principate.
He went very out of character on like a week-long escapade with all of the emperor's consorts.
Right.
And
just the thought process didn't make too much sense for
it was
Kuni.
weird.
The plot, even though the plot just kind of throw things at you and it's okay, this was like Kuni doing his things. He's now cheating on his wife.
Complete degenerate.
Complete 360 or what? Wait, 360 is the same direction. I mean, complete 180.
And then he does another 180 back to 360.
Back to 360 again. Cheats on his wife. So now building up to this moment where he's on this island and he's trapped there. Mata officially got rid of Kuni. Kuni sneaks onto the island, sees his wife Gia. And by the way, while this was happening, Gia had also cheated on Kuni with the housekeeper, Othi, I believe his name was. So they'd both cheated on each other before being reunited, because remember, this is years have passed. Years of war and Kuni being away from home. And this is Gia, his wife, who they married because, hey, he promised to always make the most interesting decision.
And she's feeling that, hey, you're making all the interesting decision like for Kuni.
Right.
Like, what is my interesting life?
Right.
This sucks.
So now that they're reunited, they catch up and so forth, but there's this, they both find out.
They both find out that they were cheating, and then Soto,
who is
new housekeeper.
New housekeeper for Gia, because when she cheated with Othi, Otho, they had to get a new housekeeper. That's Soto's new housekeeper. These are too many details there.
Too many details.
So
that whole thing in Soto, and this is where I'm not sure. Is this the message of the author or message of the character?
This is your plot issue you might have with the book. Another one.
And more message issue.
Okay.
Basically, Soto gives Gia a speech of like how, the heart can have more than one love, and that you cheating on Kuni is not a betrayal of Kuni. And like, why'd you do it? And like, basically, Gia doesn't regret cheating on Kuni. He's like, oh yeah, no, I didn't. Like, I needed that for me. Like, I needed to sleep with Otho to prove that I'm still in control of my life, and that is not betrayal to Kuni somehow. It was weird logic when it was explained. I thought it was kind of dumb. And then Sotos is like, hey, you can still sleep with other men and still hold Kuni as your number one in your heart.
Gia says this to Kuni.
Yeah, and then Kuni basically says like, yeah, and then they both agree that, hey, no, we're still each other's number one. It doesn't matter who we sleep with.
Right, so Kuni can have another wife.
Yeah, and on a tactical experience, it makes sense. Like Gia saying, hey, you need to get another wife because we need to trick Mata into believing that you are satisfied with your exile and that you are leaving me, like you're abandoning me. That Mata needs to believe that Kuni is abandoning Gia. That will satisfy Mata and basically save Gia, hopefully.
And you think the author's message was polygamy is okay?
Yeah, it was. I don't know, and that's the thing. It was a strange message.
Okay,
but
I think
it's possible it's not.
I think how I read into that. Well, first, the next plot point that happens there is Kuni immediately finds a wife. Jangle in our Patreon pointed this out.
Literally next chapter.
Kuni next chapter goes like, oh, I can have another wife?
No, not even next chapter. Literally the day after.
After.
Day or two after.
Like one day later. I would be a little bit hurt if you found a replacement for me within a day. Like I've built up 2-day podcast host removal. Like it would take 2 days for you to get over it.
Yeah, no, 1 day.
Okay.
One day's all I need.
1 day, Kuni goes off, finds another wife, Rasana, right?
Yeah.
And a part of that message of polygamy and you can have multiple wives. I think the author was looking at it from, hey, I don't know what the author thinks, but it does come up later via the letters and later in the book that Gia and Rasana have this clear jealousy. And there's some clear tension that builds up toward the end of the book that I would wait. I'm going to reserve judgment until the future books to see where Ken Liu goes with this, but it makes an interesting plot point.
Yeah, that's where I'm mixed on it. I'm not sure. It's just that even Soto kind of even says it in her speech to Gia.
Right.
That, again, it's the throwing away tradition and just throw it like, hey, who's to say that you can't have multiple loves in your heart? And that, yes, there will be conflict and no relationship is perfect, that there are flaws in all types of relationships, and that who's to say which flawed relationship is better than another? Basically, the whole subjectivism of like, hey, no, every relationship's flawed. This is just your flaw. It's no different from any other relationship. And so, like, yeah, there will be conflict, but there's also great love, and it's the same. It's clearly not the same.
I see what you mean.
So, like, they acknowledge that there's going to be conflict later, but that conflict is still worth it. That the scales still balance in favor of the relationship. So that was kind of
with his relationship, Kuni goes back to the island with his new wife and so forth, and basically takes the approach. This is where part of the message of the story comes, where Kuni, being open-minded, lets Kogo, who is the number one advisor, this whole tax thing, we'll get into the characters. And by the way, 2 things I want to say before we go on. 1, let us know if you like this new style that we're doing, going into the plot details.
Comment down below. Kogo is God.
Kogo is God, and also comment down below. We are so far in. We're not even on characters yet.
No.
So, finishing up with plot, we have this situation with Kuni going back to the island and being open-minded and allowing advisors, and this is where we meet Jin. Jin Mizotti, who gets a quick background story of...
Which I loved. All needed one chapter.
Like this orphan,
that was it.
This orphan story of being, grown up with these... Like, what do you call them? Just these absolute... bandits.
Hoodlums?
Hoodlums, bandits, like whatever you want to call them, just bad people. And they're not bringing their best.
They're not bringing their best.
But Jin comes. We go back into our impersonations.
Yeah.
So
I wish I could do a Biden impersonation. I just can't. I don't have the old man voice.
If your dad comes back on.
He can do it.
No, I don't mean to insult your dad. He's older than us.
He's an older man.
He's older and wiser, okay? That's all I meant. And I'm a little jealous he will replace me one day. That's all.
Yeah, one day.
So Kuni is back on this island, and he's more open-minded. He lets a woman come and be a marshal. Jin is now the marshal and lead his armies. And since he's allowing people from all over the Tiro states, and this is the conversation we had about...
Gia teaches them the lesson of like, hey, don't overlook all the women.
Half the population.
So, they have stuff. They have talent in there.
Yeah, plus your people that aren't nobles. Look at your lower class. So he's letting all these people come and invent things, and the island flourishes. And now people look to it and are like, "Hey, this island's popping."
Yeah,
like you could this island smacks. Several characters said that. Believe it or not, they said,
"Oh yeah, exactly those words."
They said that. They said this is like a 7 out of 10. I don't know, whatever our rating is. So they all come to this island and they start inventing stuff. It starts prospering, and so quickly that they create this.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It's fun. It's fun.
It's very fun, but it was also like, oh, they created submarines, they created engines, they created underground water pressure tunneling with a chemical that melts rock.
Yeah.
And then they also create brand new battle tactics. They create, it's just going through. It's like, whew, that's a lot.
They're like the Fire Nation in Avatar.
Yeah. The one thing that was like understandable, like it was the first thing that came to mind where I'm like, oh, that's a very reasonable and large step forward that made sense, is when they implemented women properly into the military instead of just kind of the, the follower gang that follows the military, but actually integrating them into the army
and so forth.
In the airships, but also a proper medical division,
right.
And also people in administration and all that's where they're actually paid a proper salary instead of just follows behind the army, which makes a lot more sense. That was an obvious step forward that makes their army significantly better.
Yeah, it all makes logical sense there.
Yeah.
I think that's the one flaw of writing like this, though, is that when the book is that dense and you have to skip around and cut all fluff, so a portion where another book would have prospered, like if you had a normal narrative style, that technology progress
would be stretched
would have
out
been maybe
a
several chapters, explained more, stretched out more, but because of the style that was chosen, like, hey, we got to get right to it, which makes it a little bit less, I guess, believable, or a little bit less like, oh, okay, we're here now. So that can happen with this structure. So why, it has its pros, has its cons. And so with this, they go and Kindo Marana he was on the bigger island next time. They take over him, they beat Kindo Marana, and they land in, I think, Jinpen on the main islands, and it's Kuni versus Mata.
And it's the now invasion, it's the war between Kuni and Mata.
Exactly. And this is several years after the Principate is formed, because Kuni's been on that island for years, building up, doing so forth.
By the way, right at the beginning of this war, I actually laughed where Kuni goes to Zudi, takes Zudi back from Mata, saves Gia, and then I think the same chapter, Mata, or like literally the next chapter, Mata comes in and takes Zudi back, and now Gia and Kuni are separated again. I'm like, Jesus, this author really doesn't want Gia and Kuni together at all.
Not for a second.
Not for a second. Can't have one whole chapter.
And the reason Mata, because Kuni didn't want to rebel outright for a long time because Mata, remember, was keeping Gia captive. But the whole twist on that was when Kuni came to visit Zudi and came to the city of Zudi and saw his wife Gia, the new housekeeper, Soto, who showed up one day to help Gia out. Soto, the housekeeper for Gia, her secret
Mata's
identity is that she's Mata's aunt, right? So when Kuni came back and Soto said, hey, I'm Mata's aunt. If Mata comes here, don't worry. I'll give him a scolding. I'll give him one of these.
I'm gonna give him one of these.
And so what she ends up, so Kuni can go back and say, I can successfully go and attack Mata finally because I know that my wife will be safe. Or I should say, one of my wives will be safe. You little dog, you. So he ends up coming, and Mata goes to kill Gia, but Soto, the aunt of Mata's there, and he's like, oh, damn it. I have a little bit of a heart. So that happens. They have their whole fight. They're clashing. Kuni's making progress, especially with Marshal Jin and the new technology and so forth. And where are we at now, Rich? What's happening here?
We're off to part 5.
Damn it. Okay, so we're on to part 5. We're putting this is on angry mode.
This
is how much I have to freaking edit.
This is a dense book.
This is a dense book, but I like the style so far. We're getting on top of things.
It's necessary at this point.
It's helping think back on the novel. Hopefully, this can be a good tool for anybody who, if you have read the book, to go back for a summary, or if you haven't read the book and are just listening along and now you have the whole book. So we're on part 5 now, and part 5 is called Clouds Race Across the Sky.
There we go. Oh. And so this part 5 starts off with, this is the Kuni takes back Zudi, then Mata immediately takes it back, and Kuni and Gia are separated again. And then we have Kuni and Mata's parlay.
Kuni Mata's parlay, okay.
So this is basically Kuni and Mata meet on the water, and Mata threatens to cook and eat Kuni's father.
I love how this was written because it's like
It was a
Mata,
greatly written
Mati
scene.
goes down, comes back up, lays table, goes down, comes up, lays
Brings
this,
knife.
brings knife, comes down, comes up, brings father. What? And he just says so bluntly, Kuni, if you do not surrender, I will cook and eat your father in front of you.
And you get the internal dialogue of Kuni like crapping his pants. He is scared, but he realizes like, I have to bluff. This is the performance of my lifetime.
Right.
And he basically throws it off saying like, go ahead, eat him. Like, who cares? And just showing that he has the will to keep going and shows that it's pointless it's a pointless threat. And then you see Mata's perspective of he's disgusted that Kuni would think that he would actually do it. And from the reader's point of view, I'm going like, of course he thinks that. You are a butcher. You slaughtered so many people.
Like literally
Like,
everybody.
I don't see why he wouldn't think that. And Mata, why do you have such a weirdly high opinion of yourself?
Like,
Like,
he actually
you're
think
not above that?
You think I'd kill his father? Well, you just went to try to kill Gia. You did kill 20,000 people. You did kill this.
You killed a lot of people. You've
So-
done a lot of terrible things. This one is not that far from your MO.
But they come at a standstill and end up signing a treaty.
No.
What? Yeah. They signed
We
a
got
treaty.
we have a 3-year gap.
Battle between them, right?
Yeah, so
Oh, right. They have 3-year-long battle, but it happens in like boom, like a chapter. where
there's
it's
a stalemate
explained.
where Jin's even after this they Jin and Luan Xia trick Mata into getting rid of his only good advisor.
Right.
The Tarulu Pairing, who's the only smart individual that's actually keeping Mata's team around, like alive, and actually a strategist. They trick him, and Pairing dies. And then we have the battle with King Zato Ruthi. And that's where this guy, he's a philosopher, and somehow he's thrown into the seat of power, and the mob basically makes him king. And he follows the book of some philosopher to a T, even in war, where to the point where it's like, when the opposing army is attacking you and they're crossing the river, you must wait and let them cross first, and also give them 100 feet of land so that they can prepare, and then they will attack you. And that's how it works.
It's a fair battle.
Make it a fair, honorable battle. That's how it works. And so he just goes, yeah, instead of attacking them while they're in the river and have a disadvantage, we're going to wait. And he gets stomped because he's a dum-dum.
Yeah.
And then he looks down on Jane and is like, of course I'm going to win. It's a woman. Of course. I can't lose against a woman. And then he gets owned. And yeah. So we have that. Then 3 more years of war where it's
a stalemate.
Basically a stalemate.
Stalemate comes, and we get to a point where Mata and Kuni sign a treaty.
Yeah.
Which is promptly ripped up.
Immediately.
Like, you think it's going one direction, and boom, it's ripped up, and they go back to war. And Kuni makes progress this time around. I mean, makes even more progress and has Mata on the brink. Well, Mata's army's going around. Wherever Mata is, he's winning in that city. He's winning his battles, but the rest of his army's elsewhere where Mata isn't. Kuni's winning.
Yeah.
And so it comes to a point where we get to the final battle. Right? Did I skip anything? Or
yeah. No, we get to the final battle.
Yeah. So we get to the final battle, and put us in that scene, Rich. What happens there?
Well, this is where my bias comes out.
Here we go.
Basically, Mata knows that it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
And Kuni actually wins the hearts of Mata's troops by sending the women of the Kokru army forward and singing standard Kokru songs, and they go out there to try and heal and all this, and Mata's army hears it and is longing for their mothers, for their daughters, their sisters. And Mata realized, like, I've lost the heart of my army. And instead of surrendering or just killing himself, he's like, we're gonna make one last push. He takes all the still loyal men.
Before that, though, his lover Mira dies.
Yeah,
so that's what pushes him over the edge. The person we didn't even mention because god, there's a lot to mention.
There's so much.
But Mira is one of his. They had this little love story basically where Mira is the wife, or sorry, not wife, or sister of one of the original 800 people that was with Mata when he was just starting, and so he felt this loyalty to her, and they ended up falling in love, having this love story. Mira gets killed. So Mata finally is pushed over the edge, goes on a rage, just bashes through, says screw his army. He succeeds in killing so many of Kuni's soldiers, but also all of his, to the point where there's like him and 20 something left, like at the edge of a lake, river, ocean, whatever. They're at the edge, and we didn't even mention once. This is hilarious. We didn't even mention once Daff or Rock. Dafiro.
Oh, God, there's so many.
We didn't even mention them yet. We're kind of just throwing in at the end that there were these two characters the whole time, Dafiro and Rock, right?
Yeah.
Rack. Dafiro and Rack, who are brothers who have been split up in the war. We kind of get their point of view.
Soldiers in
Huno,
Kuni's army and a soldier in Mata's army.
They get split up. So one of the brothers is in Kuni's, one's in Mata's, and so they ended up really falling in love. Not falling in love, just respecting and admiring their respective leaders. Mm-hmm. So I believe it was Rock, who was with, I think it's Rafiro, who was with Mata until the very end. And when Mata gets surrounded, he chops off the head of his horse, right? Or his horse
dies.
Horse dies, and then he kills himself. And so does Roth. And then we get Kuni's point of view, and it's kind of just a sweet, happy-ish ending where Kuni is now in charge with Kogo, and the book ends.
Yeah.
God.
Lord.
God damn it, Rich. This was the worst pod episode to start this new bullshit plot summary. God damn it.
By the way, if you can't tell, the book's a little dense. We missed some things. We didn't go over everything. We cut content out of that summary.
Yeah, we did.
But let's go right into characters.
We've
delayed this.
Please.
I gave characters a 7.5.
I gave a 6.5.
6.5.
Yes, okay. I did. So
significantly lower than mine.
Like a point. I wouldn't say significant.
It's significant.
So why'd you give it 7.5? Which characters you like? Which didn't you like?
I'm mainly impressed with his the author's ability to make me really like characters in one chapter. Like I really liked Jin Mizotti in one chapter. It's all I needed. Just her backstory. I'm like, great. I'm behind her 100%. This is fine.
Yeah,
love it.
I totally get you.
Luan Zia. Like I remember my feeling of
Luan Zia.
No, it's Luan Zia.
Shit, is that how they say it in the auto?
Yes.
Damn it! I tried to one up you.
You can't get me that easily. But in the beginning, you see the assassin, the kite assassin, and you think, oh, this guy's going to be like an important player. I think he's like, are we going to meet him? And then basically for a whole like 2 parts, we completely skip him. Like we don't get him for another like 100 pages.
Which him and Jin end up falling in love, right?
Yeah. Or having
also Jin's character, her temptation at the end. What do you think about Jin's character?
That was great.
And
fantastic
she
character.
She has this moment where she's tempted by the gods to betray Kuni. And again, fulfilling the message of the story, one of the messages of the story is because Kuni was trusting, open-minded, and trusted Jin, Jin had this introspective thought of, wait, if I can't follow Kuni, there is no leader out there. Because Kuni trusts me, I will show trust in return.
Well, yeah, it's the moment of she's being treated like a queen, and she's on that razor's edge of, I have every opportunity to betray Kuni and be my own leader. We'll basically stalemate between Kuni, myself, and Mata. No one could win without my help, and I could become queen.
Right.
But then she kind of realizes, like, even despite my pushing of the boundaries, Kuni mailed her a letter and congratulated her and still trusts her. And she's going like, man, Kuni believed in me when I was quite literally nothing.
Yeah.
And despite me pushing the envelope on my authority and really kind of, like, he has reason to not to trust me. He still does. Like, that, if I can't follow him, I, like, can't follow anybody, and at that point, if you can't trust Cooney, who can you trust? So she makes that decision to, I'm still going to follow. And God even tries to tempt her.
Yeah.
And
One of the gods, right?
She turns God down.
And she has this moment at the end. Like this book, why I said at the beginning, I didn't have this urge to read on to book 2. And I still don't. But people that we like Shelf Centered, for example, saying, hey, book 2, people love it. And of course, the author, I want to read because it's the author as well. But Jin Mizzotti, this marshal that Cooney appointed, her ending is that she goes back, gets revenge on all the people that wronged her and abused her as a kid. And so she also, everything's kind of bow tied with Jin's as well. It's just, hey, she has her arc. She has her done. Move on. So there's not anything like, do I want to read Jin again next book? Not particularly. Like,
interesting character.
She had her story.
She's done.
I would say that my most since I didn't give it the 7, let me throw some fire into this, okay?
Yeah.
The most disappointing part about the characters here for me was Gia.
Yes,
and
completely
because agree. I really like Gia's character, especially at the beginning where the love story between Cooney and her being, hey, I'm looking for the most interesting. And she has these herbal, which I guess is more negative to a plot, but remember she had this herbal stuff and she is able to make concoctions?
Yeah.
That didn't come up later in the plot like I thought it would. I thought it was leading somewhere. But just like Gia's character, I thought her character was leading somewhere. I'm sure that she gets way more explored in the sequels and in all the rest of the books. But in this book in particular, she kind of takes a back seat and is definitely left out of a lot of the latter half of the book.
Yeah, I was really interested in her character in the beginning, but by the end, the author didn't give her a lot of page time to do stuff. Her chapters were not as interesting. And the one point of conflict or change, or like the only interesting thing she really did was cheat on Cooney and then justify it. And
right, that's her whole... So while there's 4 or 5 years of him gone at war, the point of view we get is her cheating.
Yeah.
Like that's
it?
That's it, really? Really?
Like, and even the reason for it was odd and honestly kind of confusing and felt like copium. Like she's coping with the idea. Like
I felt
she didn't even like at least Cooney like immediately after regretted it.
I think you said this in the Patreon discussion where you were saying that the author almost needed to create a character conflict to get Cooney in the right position. So it almost felt like he had them cheat because he wanted the story to go a certain direction.
Yeah, it felt far more art. That whole plot and character direction felt the most artificial, that he wanted the characters to be in a certain spot in the next book. So deliberately kept Gia and Cooney apart to a point of ridiculousness of like, even when they're together, like very next chapter, separated for years again. Like they get no time together, even though probably should.
Right. And where Gia doesn't, an essential thing with all books is that not just the world, but the characters live off the page. Where Gia, and not just off the page, off the narrative. Like why you love Wheel of Time so much is that there's other things are happening in the world and it spreads, the people perceive events in the Wheel of Time differently from how far away they are from one another. People have different stories about it. So a good character, someone who, while our point of view character like Cooney or Mata are point of view, are having their story in the background, other characters are also moving, things are happening. Whereas Gia, for several years, she's a mother and of course taking care of the kids, but for several years doesn't feel like her character's moving or doing anything that affects the plot, that affects the...
She's like, doing things, but she's not doing plot things.
No, she's
and you kind of wanted her to
living a placid life where she's also not that kind of character that just sits around.
Yeah,
she is literally introduced as, no, life, it's interesting. That's who I want to marry. And you have the most uninteresting story in the latter half.
I was looking so forward to, like, when she's introduced, like, in one chapter, Cooney and Gia get married. I was going like, oh, this is great. Instead of a romance story throughout the book where it's just the will they, won't they, we get, hey, they immediately were married. And I would love to see the romantic dynamic of them actually as a married couple and partnership and them working off each other, and Gia with Cooney and her bettering him. And I would love all these little things where they grow together and you would actually see their romance throughout the book. But we don't really get that. And it's just, it felt like a missed opportunity.
I demand something of you, Richard. Lower it to a 7.
725.
I think that was our longest pause in podcast history for you. But and not to drag the characters. That is the one character that most negatively impacted my character score. Rich, how about you being the higher rating? You say, what character did you love? Why was it so good? Because I went first with my least favorite point.
Kogo.
Kogo
is God. Like, oh my God, he's the smartest character in the entire book.
I admired his tax policy. How genius was that tax policy?
That tax policy was great. He basically said, hey, how do we tax the invisible income? People are hiding income and not actually selling it. So he basically created sales tax.
Yeah.
In a very interesting and fun way.
In a way that incentivized the citizens to pay their taxes. Because how he set this up, correct me if I'm wrong, is he had a lottery system. So whenever something was sold at let's say it's a store, and sold to a customer, the customer had to get a lottery ticket. They were given
for spending money at a store, X amount of dollars.
You want the lottery ticket. So the customer's getting one from the store owner. Now, the store owner is not just going to not get the lottery ticket, because the customer's going to go there and be like, hey, where's my free lottery ticket? So the customers are going to be asking for them. And the store owner can only get those lottery tickets from the government, like from Cooney and Kogo. So essentially every transaction that happens will be verified, because they have to go through the top down to get the lottery tickets to pass all the way to the bottom that people want.
Yeah.
That's pretty smart.
It is pretty smart. And oh my God, all of Kogo's designs for changing up the army, putting different people in charge. He's the one that finds Gia. He's the one that basically runs things. He runs the city, and then also the army, and is able to figure out different ways for espionage. And just endless. And even by the end, he realizes, I have too much influence in society, in the army, and all this. So I'm deliberately going to embezzle money and then be told off by Cooney and basically put in my place. And now Cooney will no longer suspect me of being a rival, because I've ruined my own reputation enough that I'm no longer a rival to Cooney. Because he did that all deliberately, just so he's like, I like my spot. I don't want to be seen as being too ambitious.
Right.
Genius. He's a god.
People ask, who would be your fantasy squad? If you had, who's your fighter? You pick a fighter from the series. You could pick Helen, Darrow, whatever.
I pick Logan Nine Fingers.
Who's your general? You have Dalinar, maybe. I don't know. Now, who is your advisor?
Kogo Yellow.
There's no other question. He is the god of advisors.
Yeah.
And so you loved Kogo. What about, we talked a lot during plot, but our characters, Mata and Cooney, they're very clear on their personalities, where Cooney is he's more merciful, but he's a collector of people, and it makes him personable, makes him a good leader. The one consequence of that, mentioned way earlier, is that if you rely too much on someone like Kogo, things could fall apart.
Yeah.
Whereas Mata is your very hard-headed, power, might is right, like you said. So they're clear characters. What else about them? Was it just their opposites that made them interesting to follow? What else made them interesting to you?
Well, I was really interested in the characters, and then by the end, I think they deviated to a point of Cooney was too good, where all his advisors, basically all the morally gray decisions were made by Cooney's advisors. And so Cooney was kind of
even the
absolved
mishaps,
of all of the sins of his side. Not completely, but the worst thing that he made a real active decision of was two things: him cheating on Gia, and then also by the end betraying Mata's truce and basically immediately going back on his word.
But he was heavily advised to do that.
Yeah. But all the other little moments of the little more cruel things, that was other people. That was the people beneath him that made those decisions. And Mata just kept looking more and more like a dumbass, to the point where he's just so stupid. like he had no positive qualities at
Right.
all by the end. He had nothing. Like there was not a single positive thing that could be said about him.
Do you wish he did have a positive quality?
Yeah, I was, because by the beginning it went from, oh, I think we're gonna get a hero's journey, and then, oh, there's a little bit morally gray, to the point of, oh no, he's just a dumb idiot and he has no moral qualities, more morally good qualities at all.
And you can see how he fell this way.
His final charge, he had the last 800 people where he slaughtered all these people on a suicide mission, and all of his men are dying instead of just surrendering and letting his men live. Not crying at that point. Didn't feel any bad things about that. It's his horse dies, and then he cries a no, and then kills himself. He feels more about his horse than the men following him.
Right.
That's how, like, awful person. He's a terrible person. And so, yeah.
Whereas you could see it went this way because everybody in his life betrayed him, even his uncle.
Yeah.
And he thinks Cooney betrayed him as well. And eventually, did fight Cooney. So the initial miscommunication turned out to be, hey, they're at odds ends with each other. So you see how he goes this dark path. Were you looking for a little bit more complexity?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Because there was some, and then all the complexity left by the end.
I say to you again, Richard, lower that score. Lower that score. Because I think the lowest point about this book, they're not bad at all. I gave it 6.5. The characters are the lowest part about the book as a whole. I think it gets leveled up from the other things. Like, I think the prose, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the world building. The emotion I got from it was more for the feel.
Yeah.
The feel of just, I like the vibe of it. I like the expansiveness. It was interesting. It was new. So I give all the credit there. Characters, there were definitely some misses and a bit of apathy in some regard to the characters, which is almost purposeful, because it's not like you read the Bible and you're, crying over Job, or you're reading the Torah or whatever character. It's not like you're reading Noah's Ark, let's say. You look at Noah's Ark and you don't look at Noah and like you're emotionally invested. And no, it's because you're trying to learn a lesson and a moral from the story. And that's why, and that's why it's there. Whereas in this, I feel like the point of it isn't the character journey. It's not this big, intense arc. It's more so to serve the purpose of this dense world and to immerse you.
It's more cerebrally interesting. It's
you
not...
You bastard. You
what?
I
What?
hate you. I do. What?
What'd I say?
Just the way you said cerebrally, like, it ticked me off. You've just been
there's a
saying the
different-
right words today, like ma piera daddy. I can't even say it.
Ma pitare.
Again. But the way you said,
Well, the characters' stories are interesting in a cerebral way rather than an emotional way.
yeah, you're right.
So one of the most satisfying character stories was Pyrrha. Like, that conclusion was, I felt joy at it, not because I was so invested in the character, but that it was just such a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, and interesting.
Where he betrayed the emperor, betrayed the empire to this downfall, and then all this stuff. And then finally he's in the throne room with Emperor Arashi, and they break in, and he's like, wait a minute, have I got something to tell you? I'm actually basically trying to explain to the rebels that he's the real cause of the fall of the empire. He's on their side. And then before he even has a chance to explain, soldiers goes in, bashes his head in.
That was such a great end to his story, too.
Oh, perfect. That was such a
great.
Perfect end. And I was just so satisfied with that, especially how nobody will know. And that was the best moment of all this stuff, and only the reader will ever know that.
I think the two best little characters in here then were Pyrrha and Kikimi, because both the characters had that where, like, of course, Kindo knew, like you pointed out, Marana, but these are characters that basically only the reader knows what happened, and all the other characters in this world will never know.
Yeah.
That's a cool narrative/author trick. And it just gets you going, because you start to think of, I wish they knew, and it's that desire that you'll never get, and you feel in on that. You feel in on it.
You do feel in on the story, but it also is just a satisfying conclusion to this, like, trader's arc and how epic it should be, and yet is forgotten. And that's
because you expect
poetic.
It to go the way of Pyrrha is gonna, he reveals it. Hey, I was on your guy's side the whole time. And helps with Cooney, this kind of direction you'd assume.
Or that he would be betrayed in some way and lose, but he lost in such... he died in such an unimportant manner.
And realistic manner. Because
Yeah.
think of the way he went about it is, hey, you are looking like you're on the Empire side. Of course the other guy's going to go in there and kill you. You know what would be way more unrealistic is they bash down the door, start killing people, and Pierre's like, wait, let me explain. And then they all stop chopping heads off and go, oh, okay. Let's hear him out.
Ultimately, Pyrrha is not an incredibly smart individual. Smart enough, I guess.
I mean,
but
he has to be smart enough to get that high up
yeah,
and
but
to influence things.
mainly Pyrrha is patient and is thoughtful, but I mean, when push comes to shove, not able to hold the Empire together if he needs to, doesn't have escape plans. Like, what was his end game here? Like, he wanted Zana to fall, but he had no plan when Zana did fall.
I think it was so unexpected, though, for them to airdrop in.
Yeah,
that's
it was a sudden...
that's something you can't really plan for.
I get that, but it's still a... What was your end game here? And there's not much of one. So
I think his end game was probably to let, as the rebellion grows and they circle around Pan and he reveals it to there through a message or something like that. Hey, look, I have proof that something like that. But yeah, Pierro's a great character, and we got to touch on just slightly Rat and Daff, or Rock and Daff. I forget the name exactly. But how do you like us following these two? I use this lightly, but inconsequential characters to follow.
I definitely got a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern kind of vibe from them.
Okay.
It was fun. The insignificant characters that is a reflection of our main characters, which enjoy, because they both had very similar qualities to their respective lords. And I liked that little moment where the gods, like that one god split them up. And the other gods asked him, like, why'd you do that? Like, this is strange. Like, this is how you're interfering? And he's like, I just want to add a little bit of chaos here.
Right.
And in many ways, that small amount of change had a big influence, because the brother that followed Mata actually did have a lot to do with Mata's success. And he was the one person that was by Mata's side the entire time.
Right.
And led the after Mata was charging, he was the one that charged right after and got the rest of the army to go. And
right.
So that little bit of chaos was very interesting to add to the story.
That was. And it took you, it was almost like these little breaks from the main story of, your whatever example you just used.
But the brothers, how the Daff or Daxo, I don't know.
Daxa.
Cooney's soldier brother.
I think it was Daff.
Daff was kind of a coward, but more pragmatic and realistically. Like, he's willing to fight, but he's not willing to just die pointlessly. And Raph is just young and dumb, and kind of like he's just so fully engrossed into the legend of Mata Zindu that he's blind to everything else.
Yeah, and a story like this where we're following Daff, following Rack. You have these more, I guess, inconsequential characters, and you have your characters you like Pierre is an interesting character. Kikomi, interesting character. Could you see how someone like Matt's Fantasy Reviews read this book and he says it's one of his favorite books ever? He loves it. Could you see that a reader who is more plot / world building focused would like this a lot more? Because I do think, would you agree that the characters, not bad, they are good, but they don't shine. They don't stand out compared to what this book is going for.
They stand out more than I expected them to.
That's fair.
Definitely not the same as
you would expect the oh, sorry, I interrupted. Go on that.
Oh, no, it's just some characters, like I think Jin maybe gets 3 or 4 chapters total.
Right.
That's it. So, I mean, you just don't have enough time with her.
Right. For what the story's going for, you were surprised by how much the characters were developed and that you did care. I completely agree with that. That I would have expected a story like this for the characters kind of be sidelined and not really given much attention at all.
Yeah.
But more was focused on them than not.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to dialogue / prose?
Yep.
What'd you give that out of 10?
I gave it an 8 out of 10.
7.5 out of 10. We're very close.
It's incredibly impressive what this author was able to do. It's one, very poetic prose. I think it's incredibly well written, perfectly describes the setting. I know exactly where I am. the ability to introduce a character and instantly you're falling in love with the character, and then away they go. You don't see them for like 100 pages, and then they come back in. You just love them. It's such a talented way of weaving this story together. It was incredibly impressive.
My innate urge to disagree with you. Oh, I can't though, because it is really well written. I like that it seemed to me more like that Sanderson example of prose, where Sanderson, the way he describes his type of prose versus someone like Patrick Rothfuss or J.R.R. Tolkien and so forth, is imagine a window where Patrick Rothfuss's prose and J.R.R. Tolkien's prose is what are those windows in churches called? I'm so sorry. What's a
stained glass window?
Stained glass window. Imagine a stained glass window with art on it and things you want to look at. That stained glass window that Patrick Rothfuss is writing. So Patrick Rothfuss's window, his words are stained glass. Like you're reading the words for the poetry. You're reading the words to and get an emotion out of the way the sentences are constructed, the words that are used, how beautiful it is. So that stained glass window, you're looking at it for the art that the words are. Where Sanderson in his prose is just a regular glass window where it's just used as a tool to look through, to see the story, to see the characters. You're not supposed to focus on and read over the words. The intent of them is look through it. And I think this story is much so more that clear window of it's just said so succinctly. And so because of the density of the book, that's what's so impressive about it. So much gets done and so effective that it's just a clear window you look through. You never have to read a sentence twice. You're going through it beat for beat for beat. And it feels so smooth that way. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Relatively, but I think that the writing is a little bit more than just simple. It does have a level of description and clarity that is beautiful to read. And I think he does a really good job at doing that. So I do think it's a little different than a Sanderson or a Pierce Brown prose.
Okay.
So
I would say Pierce Brown and Brandon Sanderson have different styles as well, though. I'm just
different styles. I'm just direction.
Gotcha. So I have one quote that I loved from this book. Achievement had a way of lowering a man's tolerance for risk.
That is incredibly true.
I thought about that. That is, yeah. Right now, we're willing to risk everything. Rich and I.
We have nothing. Meaning we have nothing to lose.
Risk everything. Why not?
Why not?
Anything else you want to say on the dialogue prose?
Just the most impressive thing that can be done with writing is cutting out fluff and not losing substance. That's incredibly impressive to do, is writing just enough and no more, no less. That's why I really like short stories a lot, but this author, Ken Liu?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he wrote a trilogy in one book.
Yeah.
It's really what he did.
Yep.
And that's awesome.
Nice. And now just in this one book, what did you rate the world building / magic system?
I gave it a 7.75.
I gave it 8.25.
It's a well-described world, good history, and definitely want to see where the world goes next.
Yeah.
It isn't, I can't give it that 8 yet. And mainly because my talk about like that, how the technology, like that was quick. And I was taken out of the story a little bit.
Okay.
I love the gods playing their hand. I almost found it funny by the end of, you're kind of set up, you're thinking, oh, the gods like have a light touch. No, they are straight when the gods are actually like involved and go down in human form to interact. The first time it happened, I'm like, oh, this is super important. The gods are actually interfering directly. Oh my God. No, they do that all the time. They're always down there. They're just dicking around. So they have a heavy hand to play. And so it maybe took me out a little bit, but it was really funny. So I enjoyed that part. The grand scale of it was impressive, and its clarity. And
Well said.
Hard for us to describe it in one video, the whole plot, but it was very clear when we read it.
And I'd agree with you. The most impressive part about it is the scope and the history, the feeling that this place is real. I definitely got the feeling when you're reading the book. It's okay. I could believe this. The Tiro states exist, and the different cultures as well. we explored, there's Tanadu, there's Zana, there's Faka, there's Kokru, there's the island Daru up there, and the different cities. So all the different places. I bet if you like someone's really into the lore, you could go like the specific foods that were mentioned. That different cultures had their different foods.
Oh yeah,
and it was cool that when Xana took over and combined the Tiro states for the first time, they were having concoctions of different foods that were mixed. I think Kuni did that to Jir one time to impress her or something like that. So, hey, try this mixture. This is new because before all the different states were completely separate and had their own imports. But now as you see this mix and what happens when the empire takes over, that changes society in a lot of ways. I love the expansion of, I love the expansion that the empire took over. And let me backtrack for a second. The thing that we got in the first chapter before the Empire took over, there was this book that Kuni was reading from, this philosophy book or something from I forget the name. It's real tough.
Too many names.
It's real tough, but I like that they looked back to their history and you could see there was text before. It feels like it was lived in that sense. That it's not just this time period. There's stuff that happened before this, and many stuff will happen to come. And also the little thing of, I think this is more biased from being a Western audience, but this having a lot of Eastern roots in its world building, such as one thing is the different stances, like Mapi Rapi or Maparapi, the different ways you would sit in a more formal situation or more lackadaisical situation. Another thing, I was researching Confucius recently, I'm a freaking nerd, but I was researching Confucius and they used to do this, at least in ancient China and some areas in the East, where when your mother would die, you would mourn and have this grieving period. Like you would only eat a certain type of food and live a certain way for 3 years after your mother's death to represent the amount of time you are dependent on your mother. That was the idea. Like 0 to 3, you're completely dependent on your mother. And so to respect her when she dies, this is what you did in some Eastern cultures. So in this book, there were some little nuggets there of when Kuni's mom dies, right, he had to go for 30 days or something like that, 60. There was some,
I think it was something like 60.
Right. There was some root there that had to happen. And also another mimic, there was some cultural element there where you didn't name your kid for 100 days.
Yeah.
Because they could probably die. There was a high mortality rate, which is also influenced on real world societies, so and so forth. So I thought it was really cool how it brought some elements that I'm more unfamiliar with and brought me and opened up to them. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then the tie that all bow tied at the end, the gods were so interesting. My one negative of the world and the world building would be that I got confused on which god was which and who was on whose side. Yeah. We got so little of the gods. I wish we got more. And I wish I understood more of their motivations. And that's just from me being like, I'm just reading it, going through, and not like, I try to write down notes of like, okay, this guy's on this side, but then I have to go back and look. And it just wasn't super clear. I knew there were the twins with Kokuru, and there was Bartholomew, something. You get what I mean.
I do.
Okay.
The gods were confusing to me.
Yeah.
I could not get those names straight. I couldn't get many of the names straight, but the gods were up there.
You've done a spectacular job for names based on how you typically do.
I wrote them down this time. That's
big brain.
That's what I did. Now, do I pronounce them correctly? No.
You did.
I pronounced some of them better than others.
I'm not even going to try again. Oh, wait. Mapitare.
Better. Emperor Mapitare.
Okay, I got it now.
You got it.
It took me the whole video to get there.
Yeah.
That's our little character arc.
That's your character arc.
Yeah. Every episode we learn something.
But yeah. Hey, let us know what you think about this book. What do you think about our new review? Do you like us actually going through the plot kind of point by point? Or is that too much? Do you just want us to get right into our thoughts on it and kind of jump around? Up to you. What do you think? And if you're interested in supporting us, go down below, check out our Patreon, and join us for the next book club. For our next book, we're actually doing Dracula and Mort from Discworld. That's going to be exciting.
Spooky month, yes.
Spooky month. Spooktober.
Yeah, well, it's exactly what Rich said. Going over that plot summary, do you want us to do that, but condense it down more, get more detailed, or just let us know. Give us all feedback. We tried it. This was a long one, a fun one.
This was a long one.
Like, we don't have air conditioning down here because we have to turn it off so that the air conditioning doesn't get picked up on the mics. So when it hits about that gets close to 2 hour mark, you start to feel that sweat coming.
Yeah, a little bit. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.